Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I bring before you today a complete government mismanagement of the airline industry in the UK. In one particular case I've got concern of, and that's the closure of Manston Airport, a fantastic airport for which we owe Manston a great deal for their efforts during World War II. But the problem here is the same Department for Transport who've got an aviation minister, Robert Goodwill, who's responsible for seeing that we meet the aviation needs of the UK in the future. Robert Goodwill has got no expertise in the aviation industry, which figures in the way that the government actually prepare their own particular cases. It is a fact they only use experts providing they're going to agree with what they want to present. But when an expert comes along who knows quite differently, they don't like it. And in fact, I've had MI5 keeping me out of the press and media since 2001. Now, every airport throughout the world comes underneath the United Nations International Civil Aviation Organization, because each airport is host to the world's airlines and their people. And so when you go from country to country, you have to make sure that you're going to be safe when you're landing or taking off at these airports. So there's safety constraints very well laid down by this organisation. And also the management of the airport has to be overseen by the government. This is made perfectly clear in the Airports Economics Manual, 3rd edition, 2013. And in the very first chapter, chapter 1, it lays down the state's responsibilities in which they've got to address all these aspects to ensure people are kept safe in our skies and on the ground, right down to how they maintain the aircraft. But our UK government totally ignores this advice. They probably don't even know about it. And what they've done, they've set up a Quango Commission, an Airports Commission, which sounds very, very sort of highfalutin. But when you look at the makeup, there's no one with any expertise in the aviation sector. But there's one guy, Laurie Chalice, who's actually got a private pilot's license, which I suppose gives him the absolute intro into what the aviation business requires. This airport's manual also includes that when an airport changes hands, they have to provide a viable business plan at the time the contract is signed. This has never been done in all the private sales of Manston Airport. Even the current owner, Anne Gloag, bless her heart, she's a wonderful humanitarian at the age of 71, bought the airport and tried to make a go of it, but unfortunately the airlines that were there, the passenger airlines, KLM, they walked away, and so did Cargo Lux, the freight carriers, leaving her with no option but to close the airport. But she should not have been allowed to buy it in the very first place. If in fact an airport becomes into financial difficulty, the government are obliged by the International Civil Aviation Organization to give a helping hand. You know the sort of thing I mean, when the banks got themselves into difficulty, when the Financial Services Authority didn't sort of see their overspending and overstretching, and then that almost bankrupted the country, but the government had to bail them out with massive amounts of money. But strange enough, the guy who founded the Financial Service Authority, Sir Howard Davies, which he got his knighthood for, is now the head chairman of the Airports Commission. And if you read his 228-page report, as I've done, I wouldn't give a pass to a first-degree student if they presented such a rubbish paper as he has presented. He starts off in his foreword saying he takes safety very much to his heart, and he takes pollution and the noise and effects on the population. Unfortunately, when you read his report, you do not see the criteria upon which he has excluded Manston and other regional airports, and he's focusing on Gatwick and Heathrow, and also he did include Boris Island, the airport there on the Isle of Grain, on top of the liquid natural gas facility, which wouldn't be the smartest place to put it. But he's now focusing really on Heathrow, which is the most dangerous airport in the world. It's actually the only airport that stacks the aircraft at 10, 20 and 30,000 feet, waiting for a landing slot, consuming God knows how many thousands of litres of fuel in waiting to land. They land every minute at Heathrow, and Sir Howard Davis even complimented him on the fact that they're even now considering telling the pilots, going round and round in circles after they have lots of hour-long journeys from eastern countries, that if we can control their cruising speed, we can land them even closer together than 1 minute. Where will this safety factor come in? I mean, if we land them within half a minute of one another, 10 seconds of one another, it's an accident waiting to happen, when there are many airports, including Manston, that can very easily fill this capacity. They're closer to Europe than Heathrow. In fact, aircraft from Heathrow have to fly over Manston airspace on European and Eastern destinations. This is appalling misuse of the government not knowing what their business is and not knowing what their responsibility is. And I will be taking them to account on this, because we can't have the same Department of Transport as the Marine Minister, Permanent Under Secretary of State, has allowed this Montgomery to be a risk to lives, to people. We've got Robert Goodwill, whose only expertise is as managing director of a company called Mothorpe, in which he arranges eco-friendly burials in North countryside, North Yorkshire countryside. So if there is a massive accident at Heathrow, which is bound to happen if we continue the way we're going, he can arrange for your loved ones to be buried in North Yorkshire countryside. That's his expertise, and that's what the government does, appoints these quango organisations who know nothing about the business and interfere with the natural processes of competition between all the airports. So I'm going to leave this with you now. I want you to think on this. You'll look on my website and you'll see all the information there, because as the world leading scientist, I have to make sure of my facts first before I embark on any research program. And here we've got the government yet again, underneath the same Secretary of State, Patrick McLaughlin, who was a coal miner in Littleton Colliery, and he broke through the picket lines, making him a scab, and they couldn't put him back in the pit again afterwards when the miners' strike was over, because he would have been probably seen to amongst his fellow workers who were trying to save the mine and his job. And Maggie Thatcher in 1989 rewarded him with a junior ministerial post in the Department of Transport, which now he is the Secretary of State. It's all bad news, but I will undertake to sort them out if I get, as I hope, the MP for Strood and Rochester. It will give me the power to exercise my will in Parliament. Thank you very much indeed if you've listened to it so far, and I hope you look on my website. It'll be www.mikebarkermbe.com. It'll be live in about a week's time now, which will be about the 12th of November. Thank you very much indeed for listening.